Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Joe Cox. I am political officer for Labour Unions. And for those of you that don't know, Labour Unions is the collective voice of the 12 trade unions that are part of the Labour Party. We bring the collective voices of 4 million working people to the heart of the party. Can I just ask my panellists to make sure that their mics are muted? For the time being, there you go. I will unmute you very soon, I promise. So this is the third in a series of discussions about how trade unions and the Labour Party can work together to shape the new normal. This week, we'll be exploring what a rebuilt social security system would look like, how we can win it, and how we can change the lives of working people and their families for the better. And as a result of the pandemic, millions more have been forced to navigate the social security system over the last few months. And despite a few last-minute measures from the government, our social security system has huge gaping holes. And these holes have undermined our ability to tackle the pandemic, with inadequate statutory sick pay and little protection for gig workers. The long-standing flaws in the social safety net have been further exposed. Poverty level support, unacceptable waiting times, harsh sanctions and means testing has meant record numbers of people in poverty. After coronavirus, we need to rebuild a better, fairer society, and a universal and strong social safety net is the foundation. We're joined by some excellent speakers this evening. I will introduce them all and then ask them to make a 5 or 10 minute contribution. So first up, we'll have Jonathan Reynolds, MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Jonathan will be followed by Deirdre Costigan, who's the National Officer for Disability Equality at Unison, and Joanne Kearns, who's Deputy Head of Research at USDOR. So without further ado, Johnny, can I invite you to give some introductory remarks?
Can you hear me okay? I think I'm not muted. Great. Joe, thank you so much, and thank you, Tulo, for putting together this event this evening. I mean, this is a big moment. It is potentially a beverage moment. Not only, as you say, because large numbers of people are experiencing the social security system for the first time, but also that even the government themselves have been forced into beginning the crisis with their own recognition that the system we had going into it would not have got us through. So as you said in your introduction, we've seen that rise in universal credit. We've seen the suspension of sanctions and some of the conditionality. It's, I think, quite important that people understand that the universal credit that they are experiencing now is not the universal credit as it has been going into the crisis. We've seen the restoration of the 30th percentile in local housing allowance. And in a way, we've seen an even bigger acknowledgement than that, which is the creation of schemes like the furlough scheme, effectively acknowledging that we need a whole tier of support above the existing system that we had. Now, our reaction to that has been to say, good. We welcome the fact that you yourselves have said this system will not get us through. An honest acceptance of where we were is the right place to begin. But those changes from the government are clearly not enough. We can see that every day with each set of statistics that we get released. We, on the back of what they said, have said this. There are clearly some things that must happen because of the nature of this crisis, things like statutory sick pay being available to everyone. And in addition, we've chosen to prioritise our requests that the things the government could do that would make the biggest difference to everyone quickly. So they include the end of the 5-week wait, the end of the benefit cap, because clearly some families cannot even experience the increased support that the government themselves have made available, an end to the 2-child limit, the suspension of the savings threshold, effectively the biggest means test in universal credit, and crucially, the uprating of legacy benefits, JSA and ESA, alongside that universal credit increase. Now, specifically on that last point, ESA and JSA along with the state pension, are clearly the major contributory benefits in our existing system. They're the things that you're eligible for by way of your national insurance contributions, i.e. they're not means tested. And they are still a major part of the system. I think too often the conversation is just about universal credit, when we've seen actually an extra 250,000 claims for JSA in the last 6 weeks alone. And of course they exist because universal credit is means tested, and if you have savings or your partner works often, you find that you are ineligible. Now, those national insurance-based contributory benefits are now exceptionally low. I mean, £74.35 a week, even less if you're under 24, compared to some European countries where workers are getting 80% of their pay before they've been made unemployed. So when I say that contributory benefits need to go up, that is what I am talking about. It's got nothing to do with disability support. It doesn't mean that you don't have a fully universal system, but it is about that recognition that a social security system is different components interacting with each other. And in terms of our existing contributory benefits, they simply must be increased and considered in light of other changes to the system. I should also say that our housing team, on top of our proposals from my shadow working pensions team, have obviously proposed a ban on evictions and a further increase in housing benefit for the local housing allowance being upgraded to the 50th percentile. Now, clearly that would make a massive difference in terms of the crisis we're seeing with people's housing situation and the potential for significant rent arrears. These are all things that could be done now, they could be done quickly, and they can make a substantial difference to people during this crisis. But there are also things we can build on. So if you think about the government's argument for the two-child limit, you'll have heard it many times. It's that people on social security, they say, have to be subject to the same pressures, the same disciplines as people who aren't. Now, I think that conversation is wrong. I think it always ignores the fact that universal credit is an in-work benefit as well as an out-of-work benefit. But this crisis has made those arguments absolutely absurd. The idea that anyone would make a choice on their family size linked to the possibility of a crisis, a global pandemic in 3 years' time is clearly absolutely ridiculous. So we've got to use the crisis to prosecute the kind of arguments that we'll need going forward. I just got to check a message from Joe. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I'm getting a lot of feedback on this side, but I can't change anything. Let me just make sure I don't leave the conversation if I do that. Is that better? Well, it's much better at my end. I think I'm not sure. Sorry, what happened there? It's the first time on Crowdcast. Now, looking to the future, we are committed to a full replacement for universal credit, not pausing it, not reforming it, scrapping it, and replacing it with something completely new. Alongside that, we have a commitment to develop a strategy which will be about the full eradication of child poverty in the UK. Now, I know at the last election, sorry, I'm getting the feedback again. Is that better? That sounds better to me. I'm getting some nods as well. Sorry about that. At the last election, we promised something similar, but we didn't have at that point a replacement policy. Now, I am determined that that cannot happen again. We clearly have to have a serious, workable alternative that will deliver on the objectives that we have, that offers real security for everyone. It will not be the mean sanctions-based, what I call a Victorian ethos of the existing system, but a modern, effective system with widespread political support. And I also think a discussion like this should go beyond universal credit. I want to have a social security system that lets people seriously be given the opportunity to retrain at some point in their career if that's what they need to do. Now, other countries have systems like that. We have never got anywhere near that. There is a clear need to see a substantial extension of employment rights to self-employed people. I want a pension system that has flexibility in it so that people, as they're nearing the end of their working lives, can perhaps work in a different way. They might not want to work full time, and I think there's a way the pension system could do that. And in disability benefits, there is a need for some serious reform, particularly around the work capability assessment, which clearly needs changing because of the distress that it causes, but also because it's simply so inefficient to have a system where so many decisions are overturned on appeal. That's clearly a system that is not working. In addition, I think the crisis has given us the chance to consider some things that frankly wouldn't have been on the agenda before. I know the TUC have long been keen on the kind of wage replacement schemes that exist in other European countries alongside comprehensive universal support. Now, historically, we've never had anything like that, but with the furlough scheme, we've had our first experience of it. And with people all across many different occupations now having personal experience of that, I think that's something we've got to consider. I'll say no more than that. On the pension system, any pension system needs widespread coverage, sustainability that we can afford it, but it's also got to be sufficient. Now, auto-enrollment has helped a lot on the coverage of the pension system. It's currently financially sustainable. I don't think that's in doubt. But the big one in this country is adequacy, sufficiency. The UK state pension is not generous by international standards. If you consider it alongside other parts of the system, particularly the NHS and how things like pension credit work, it does look a lot better. And if you consider it alongside occupational pensions, it is much better. But that has got to be, I think, the starting point in conversations for how we look at future changes around things like the triple lock. It's how that pension system provides sufficient support to people in retirement. I'll say a brief word on WASPI. I've always been a supporter of the WASPI campaign. I know our policy at the election got a mixed reception. I'm not in any way running away from that. And I know that things will have moved on significantly by the time of the next election. But there still will be at that point 50s women who are not receiving their pension. And I'm hopeful we'll still be able to work with them and look at something that will be part of the answer to that problem. Finally, I just want to say I know this agenda is hugely ambitious, and I know it's especially ambitious compared to what have been 10 very difficult years of austerity. But I am absolutely certain we can do this. I've had some brilliant support from the affiliated unions so far, and the unaffiliated unions. I mean, PCS have been absolutely great, and from the TUC. So look, that support is hugely appreciated, as is your involvement in the event tonight, and I hope that'll be something we continue to have in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Thank you, Johnny. That was a really good explanation of where your thinking's at, where the party's thinking at, and set up the conversation really, really well, I think. Next, we've got Deirdre. Do you want to comment on anything that, reflect on anything you'd like to in what Johnny has said, and obviously bring out some other issues from a Unison perspective?
Thanks. And thanks very much, Jonathan, for that. I think it was really interesting to hear. Particularly welcome your clarification around contributory benefits. Very much welcome hearing that. You know, as you've said, we're at a moment now really with the coronavirus pandemic where, you know, a lot of the old thinking has been blown away. Who knew we'd have the furlough scheme? Decisions have been made we never thought possible. And so in many ways, we're in the position we were in 1997, when I think the line was to Frank Field at the time, to think the impossible. And that's where we're at now. And that's, I think, where part of this conversation is about tonight. So very much welcome being part of it. So Unison is a trade union of predominantly working people. We estimate that around 200,000 of our members are disabled. And I'm the National Disability Officer, so I'm going to predominantly talk about their experience. With 200,000 working disabled members, we're a very unique voice, I think, and probably the biggest representative body of disabled workers in the country. So many of those workers will be on in-work benefits. This includes universal credits for those who may be on low pay, personal independence payments or PIP, for those who need support to maintain their independence. But we also have members who are still on legacy benefits, as of course we now have a two-tier system in operation. It's a patchwork, really. And many of our members have become disabled over the course of their working lives. So where these conditions are progressive, they may reach a stage where they go on to claim ESA. So we have a broad range of members in receipt of different benefits. And I think that reflects the complexity of the system we're dealing with. And there's no easy answer, I think, to reforming this. But there are three areas, I think, where our disabled members in Unison face the biggest hurdles. And these are PIP assessments, so personal independent payments assessments, work capability assessments for ESA, and the multitude of issues with universal credit, some of which Johnny has outlined. So although they're not the same, in many ways, the issues with PIP assessments are similar to those with work capability assessments. In 2018, Unison undertook a survey of our members who had applied for PIP. 64% of those replying weren't happy with the results of the assessment. And 56% said the assessment didn't take into account things they thought were relevant. And of those people who weren't happy, 70% of them saw a reduction in their income as a result. So it had a real impact on their lives. Some of the issues with the system that our members highlighted included the quality of the assessments, such as the training and qualifications of the assessors, and basic access issues around, lack of access to a BSL interpreter, for example. Also, issues included assessments not taking into account fluctuating conditions or mental health problems, and an approach based on disabled people being seen as dishonest. There's many similar complaints about work capability assessments. As I say, they're different, but there's a similar approach really in both. But for us, one of the most worrying findings was that many of our Unison members applying for PIP reported they were explicitly told that having a job meant they couldn't get PIP. This totally undermines the whole idea of PIP, which is meant to be about supporting disabled people to live independently. And this must include the right to work if you want to. But instead, our members reported having to go part-time or give up their job entirely because they lost their mobility allowance, for example, and couldn't get to work on public transport. Now, the problems with universal credit, as I say, have been enumerated many times. We certainly welcome Johnny's commitments on ending the 5-week wait, the 2-child limit, and the benefits cap. But our disabled members would also like to see the return of disability premiums, for example. And we need to end the 2-tier system by uprating benefits rather than going for the lowest common denominator. Our members also have a broader concern around the accessibility of the benefits system. Inexplicably, universal credit is digital by default, which excludes many of our members, whereas PIP has not allowed online applications and focuses on a paper-based system. So Unison wants a choice of either online or paper-based applications so that no disabled claimant is disadvantaged. So, as Johnny has said, this is our beverage moment. How do we remake the system to make it work for everyone? Well, I know some have put forward universal basic income as the answer. Now, although Unison doesn't have a formal position on this, our disabled members do have significant concerns. It sounds like a great idea, but it needs to include payments to cover the additional costs disabled people face. And once you do this, you're back to creating some sort of assessment process. So it doesn't solve the problem it purports to address. And that's before we even begin to consider the geographically variable cost of housing, for example. So what is the answer? Well, any new system needs to understand the changing world of work. Many of our members have 2, 3, or even 4 jobs, and they fall out of eligibility for some benefits, including statutory sick pay and indeed for pension entitlements. Our system needs to reflect the reality of people's working lives. We also believe that there's a case for more localisation in the system, moving away from the centralised command and control of the civil service. I think the COVID-19 epidemic has shown us that local authorities are often best placed to identify and provide for local communities. Unison has consistently pushed government to allow them more of a role in helping people to complete universal credit applications, for starters. Because, of course, privatisation of the assessment process has clearly failed. This is not a reflection on the workers providing the service. Where profit is the motive, then staff training and terms and conditions suffer, and this inevitably leads to a bad quality service. But overall, we would like to see a fundamental rethink of disability, benefits and work. And they all need to be looked at in the round. Firstly, the benefit system needs to stop coming from a default position of seeing disabled claimants as cheats. We operate a self-assessment tax system for self-employed people. So why can't we have a similar approach with disabled people? Start by assuming people are telling the truth. Investigate and question where there's a reason to do so. Secondly, the benefit system needs to get its head around the fact that many disabled people work, and that disability can come and go or progress over a working lifetime. The system needs to be flexible and it needs to support people to work and not hinder them. PIP assessors should be looking for ways to help people to keep them in work, not removing their only means of transport. And thirdly, the benefit system needs to take into account the labour market discrimination disabled people face in getting and maintaining good quality work. This is twofold. Don't penalise people who have been pushed out of work because their employer refused to make reasonable adjustments. And change the law so the right to reasonable adjustments is properly enforced and disabled people can stay in good jobs when they want to. Maybe it sounds like a lot to some. Maybe it sounds like thinking the impossible. But for Unison's disabled members, it's just a basic human right. Their right to live independently. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. That was a really important contribution. I particularly liked the echo that this is our beverage moment. And I think that's something that the whole panel will share. I'm sure everyone watching will share that as well. And it's really interesting that you reflected on the rights to reasonable adjustment towards the end of what you were saying, because, of course, rights at work, the labour market, social security, these things intersect very intimately. And this is my attempt at bridging into what Joanne Cairns is trying to say. Thank you. So over to you, Joanne.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for that introduction. So as Deirdre and Jonathan have both, I think, explained really well, clearly a huge job to be done to repair our social security system. And also I've been campaigning on this for many years. We want to see a radical overhaul of the system. Universal credit, as everybody knows, is not fit for purpose. The 5-week wait, the 2-child limit, and the punitive sanction regime is completely unfair and unworkable. We need also a system that's much more user-friendly. A lot of our members recently moved over onto universal credit during the current crisis, and 94% of those members that they had difficulties in the process. So clearly there's a massive for reform, but that reform has to go hand in hand with improvements in workers' rights and working conditions. The coronavirus crisis has shone a light on the job insecurity and low pay that so many workers, many of those essential key workers have been struggling with. And USDAR represents payroll and distribution workers, and we're campaigning for a new deal to recognise the contribution they make and reward them fairly. Key part of that is obviously a real living wage, a wage of £10 an hour at least, and for everybody, regardless of age. I know this is a party policy too. The new deal for workers needs to go beyond our team, because we're facing a recession that's far worse than anything any of us can remember. And there is a real danger that insecure work is going to spiral even further. So we're calling for a whole range of measures, including the right to an employment contract that's based on the normal hours of work. So lots of workers who are on short contracts, and their hours vary from one week to the next. 2/3 of our members are regularly working extra hours that are guaranteed in their contracts. And the flexibility is all one-sided, and there aren't guaranteed the hours that we get by, and that clearly needs to change. We also need protection against redundancy and dismissal. Lots of people at the moment are facing real worry about their job security. But for lots of work, including lots of retail work, this actually isn't anything to do. There's been constant restructuring for years, job loss happening all the time. So we need stronger protection against redundancy and dismissal, and it needs to be from day one of employment. We also need consultation about technology in the workplace, and we need skills so that we're able to keep up with the changes in technology that are this increased pace following this crisis. One thing that's been really widely discussed during the crisis is sick pay. And I think everybody agrees that £90.85 a week is not enough for everyone. And of course, the newspaper workers don't qualify for any fee at all. We can't have a situation during a pandemic where people are having to come into work potentially when they're ill or when they should be self-isolating because they're worried about pay. But actually, that shouldn't be any time. Nobody should be having to go to work when they're sick because they're frightened that they can't pay their wages. They're not sorry. So if ever there was a time for workers' rights to be strengthened, this should be it. But we know that this government, they'll clap for key workers one day and take away their rights the next. And as an example, a plan at the moment which many unions campaign against on Sunday trading, sharp to extend Sunday trading hours. And that's an example, but that says so much about their attitude towards unpaid workers and their lack of care. And it shows exactly why we need to stand united as a movement against this attack on workers' rights that promote this crisis, and of course why everyone needs to join the union. There's obviously much more I say about the field workers and about many problems with the universal credit, but I won't take up any more time, so I'll leave it. I just want to say really appreciate what Jonathan had to say, and I think we've got a huge task ahead to try and come up with this proper security we all need. I would also encourage everybody to contribute to the National Political Forum conversation that's going on at the moment on 30th June, I think. The more voices that we hear and the more different ideas that we can discuss, the better. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joanne. Ending with a rallying cry to get involved in the Labour Party's National Policy Forum. Obviously this is we're at that point in the Parliament, like we said, it's a beverage moment. We're in that point in the Parliament where we can really do some deep thinking and we can really have these conversations and get into the nitty gritty of this, because as Deirdre said, there is no easy answers. The government, successive governments have created a kind of mishmash of overlapping and kind of targeted, means tested, often inadequate benefits, and it's going to take a while to think through how we then unravel that, unravel that system and build a better one. Lots of questions coming in. I want to make sure that Johnny gets the opportunity to respond, particularly around the balance between a greater role for contribution-linked support and how we balance that with needs of the individual. So I just want to give you space to sort of, to answer that, because obviously there's been a lot written about that since your interview last week. So I wanted to give you opportunity to talk about how we balance that.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, the first thing to say is any social security system is going to have different components with different characteristics. I mean, Deirdre mentioned UBI, and I've always found that an interesting argument in terms of some of the principles applied. But like Deirdre said, there's never in any system a sort of magic one-size-fits-all policy that just makes everything work. You've got to look at how different components come together. And one thing that has been absolutely clear to me, all the speakers have talked about how some of the existing system is a bit of a mishmash. Understanding of that is low. I mean, I think a lot of people think the story now is just universal credit. And clearly it's not, especially when you look at the numbers of people, particularly on JSA. Now, for me, if you look, first of all, at the level of something like JSA, as I said in those introductory remarks, you, as a minimum, have got to be talking about uprating it. But of course, the reason that people who are eligible for universal credit and the national insurance-based benefit like JSA don't claim both together is that universal credit works by simply, it will just remove that pound for pound from your entitlement, so you don't bother. I mean, that's why the claimant rate is so low, and it's only now in a crisis like this where people are being told you're not eligible for universal credit that number is rising. So if you're committed, as we are, to that full replacement for universal credit, you have to decide what you're doing with that, because it exists, it's there. And if you didn't think about that, well, again, the system just wouldn't work. Now, I think there are lots of interesting ideas on this. I want to be absolutely clear again that contributory benefits are not connected to disability benefits. That's not what we're talking about here. And in no way does having the contributory element that we have mean that we're not talking about a universal system of support. I can't be any clearer in that. It's about how those components come together. There was, for instance, one proposal that I think is interesting. It would be the Fabians one from last year, where they talked about, well, what if you treated a contributory benefit in the same way as income from a job? And actually, of course, you wouldn't get the full amount of that, but the taper would apply in the same way it would to income. So look, there are interesting ideas out about that. And my view is quite simply, we have to recognise when we're talking about a replacement for universal credit, there are other things that you have to consider alongside that. But ultimately, this is all about a comprehensive universal system that gives people more support. I mean, that is absolutely what we are talking about when we're looking at this. And connected to that, how we can learn lessons from this crisis where, clearly, if we hadn't had a scheme like the furlough scheme, can you imagine how people would be talking about the levels of contributory benefits right now? I think people would be incredibly shocked to see that's what they're expected to be there to support their family, compared again to much more comprehensive and generous contributory-based and universal-based systems that we see in other countries.
Thanks, Joe. That's really, really clear. Thank you. So, towards the end, you said you're absolutely committed to a comprehensive, universal system that gives people more support. I think that couldn't be clearer. So thank you for that. Deirdre, Joe, would you like to come in at all on the balance between contribution and universal benefits and needs-based benefits? No? Yes, there you go.
Oh, I was struggling with unmuting. And myself and Joanne are trying to communicate with each other through waving. Certainly, I think we as I say, welcome that clarification in relation to the contributory benefits. That was really welcome. I think just one thing I would say about your mention of the Fabians idea. We do need to be careful. There's an increasing instance, I think, of badly funded local councils. I mean, let's be honest, decimated local councils clawing back PIP payments to pay for aspects of the social care system that aren't being funded by the government like they ought to be. And so I have a slight concern when you put forward the Fabian's idea there, that's exactly what's happening with disabled people at the moment, and it's not a good thing. And it is covering up a abject failure from the government to deal with the crisis in social care. So again, it's the complexity thing, isn't it? Nothing is the answer on a plate, and that's why tonight is such a good idea. And I hope we'll have more discussions like this, because we do need to get it right, rather than just go for this is the panacea. This is the silver bullet. I don't know if Joanne has anything to add. I jumped in when I figured out how to work my mic.
Don't know if you can hear.
Yes, we can hear you, Jo.
Hello. I think Jonathan did really well, his position around that. I think, that hopefully that explains for people. And I think there is a sense that people feel that if they put in, they should be able to get back. And I think we have to understand that, but we also have to make sure that safety nets are there for everyone, and that some people are not put in, and that we make sure that we don't alienate those people. And I think that what Jonathan said explains that really well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to try and get as many questions and points in as possible. There's a question from, I think it's more of a point really, from Lorraine, who says that statutory sick pay doesn't cover household bills. I mean, I'm not sure that there's much that all of us would need to say on that, but I think that's a really, really vital point. Statutory sick pay is not enough at the moment. Now, Dear just putting her hand up, so maybe you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I mean, just on the statutory sick pay, it really underlines the point that Johnny is making about the moment that we have right now where we could make a difference. Because before Christmas, the government did a consultation on statutory sick pay. And actually, in fairness, they were looking at extending it out to new groups of people, and Unison responded to that. But we also signed a letter with Scope and a number of other disabled people's organisations and disability charities calling for an increase in statutory sick pay. And I have to be honest, we thought about it before we did it, because we did think, is this the right time to ask for an increase in statutory sick pay? If the Conservative government look at statutory sick pay, Boris Johnson looks at statutory sick pay, would he be more likely to reduce it than increase it? But actually, now we're at a point where the space is absolutely there to say, let's increase statutory sick pay. It's poverty pay. And coronavirus has shown us that actually it's a public health disaster if people are deciding they have to go to work because they literally cannot survive on the amount that they would get on statutory sick pay. That has really brought it home to us. And of course, it's really obvious with coronavirus, but that happens every day with other illnesses, and it has an economic impact. It has an economic impact if people are going off sick because their colleagues had to come in because they couldn't stay home on statutory sick. So I think it's a really good point, and I'm glad it was raised.
Yeah, Jo, could I just add to that? I mean, I think when we talk about the crisis, changing perceptions, changing awareness, I mean, statutory sick pay is probably right now the best example of that. I mean, in terms of the things that constituents contact me about, or even, to be honest, if we were having this discussion around this topic, we probably would have been, without this, much more focused on universal credit and things like that. The awareness is really there, and I think that is a good example. I mean, Deirdre's point on test and trace is crucial. We haven't really got to this yet, but this is an entirely voluntary system. There's no sanction in there. You're asked to comply with it. Now, look, especially with the way the government has behaved on certain things, that might have been at times quite difficult anyway. But can you imagine a situation where the second or third time you are approached and you're asked to take steps? Now, if you can work from home on a laptop computer and your pay is not affected, okay, you might be willing to do that. If that is a question of whether you can afford, to live that week, I mean, we've got to be serious about this. this is not just about us demanding, an increase in employment rights because that's what we want. That is a real problem to making that system work. And I think, again, this is why it's such an opportunity to make that claim.
I've just unmuted you, Joe.
Thank you. Just to add, the point about increase is really important. And where we negotiated full pay for people during the coronavirus crisis, and full pay for self-isolation, people who are shielded, that is something we've been able to do. But businesses are going to be struggling to keep paying that if there's going to be, long periods that a lot of people are going to have to self-isolate. So there really needs to be some intervention and support for businesses there as well. I think. Because, we have to remember there are lots of people who don't have a union behind them, and small businesses that might be struggling. So I think that's something that needs to be considered as well.
Absolutely, and obviously statutory sick pay. Not everyone is entitled to statutory sick pay as well. Certainly those. I think it's on. Is it on those workers which are paid by PAYE and paid? Is it over £120 a week or something like that? Yeah. So it's obviously not only is it low, but it's not a universal entitlement at the moment, and of course that has knock-on public health benefits as well. Problems. I want to pull out another question or a point for reflection, really, from Peter, who's he's now self-described full-time OAP. He's a carer, but since retiring, his care allowance has stopped, and he's just making the point that unpaid carers need a fairer support package overall, because obviously there's a significant drop in what he's been supported with up until this point. So I don't know if that's something that anyone wants to reflect on.
Just, I agree. I think unpaid carers should get far more recognition than they do, and more support, and there's more that needs to be done. And again, something that come to light not during this crisis, because a lot of people with caring responsibility, looking after vulnerable people who are struggling, having to take time off work, and that time being paid as well.
Yeah, Joe, if I could just add to that, I mean, the contribution of carers is immense, and the support required from them is something very much on my mind. And one of the features of this brief is it is so big. I mean, not just in terms of how much money is spent, it's basically a quarter of all the government spending is the DWP budget, but also in terms of the significance in people's lives. And each bit of the policy area that I cover and my team of shadow Labour ministers cover, could in itself be the biggest political issue that we should be talking about. And this is an example of it. I mean, we're talking about really a fundamental way in which this country works in terms of the support that carers give. So I absolutely agree with what Peter is saying and recognise the interaction. I think he's making the point about his pension and how that relates, I imagine, to carers' allowance. So yes, I agree. I mean, I haven't got, at this stage, all the answers I would like for Peter, but I would hope at some point that we would have that. But I would also ask someone like Peter, Joanne mentioned the policy forum process, or whether it's they contact us individually or take part in that, or take part in events like that. This is on our radar, this is on our agenda. And thank Peter very much for his question.
Thank you so much. Another thing that's come up in the conversation, it's been touched on slightly, but I want to give it more space, is about a replacement for universal credit. It's obviously the most important change, arguably the most important change in social security system over the last 10 years. Labour are committed to scrapping it. But obviously, as we've spoken about, it seems to be a theme that's coming out in this conversation that, how we get out and how we move people and support people as and when we develop better systems with more support. is a really, really important question and a tricky one to get right. So perhaps I'll go to you first, Johnny. I think you're probably at the beginning stages of sketching out the principles of the sort of replacement for universal credit. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I really would, and you just interrupt me if I sort of talk out the session. I mean, I go to bed at night thinking about replacements for universal credit because it's so significant. It is really so significant, and I know for me, the brand of universal credit and what it has meant for people and how substantially it needs to change means the word replaces is the right word. Now in saying that, I in no way underestimate the challenge that is, and I also recognise that people have been put through a really difficult process when they've been transferred onto that, and that even if you're proposing something good, you've got to remember that and make sure that the disruption to people, even if you're improving the system for them, is something that you're thinking of, not just that you're voting for better policies or more generous elements of the system, that it is still a good experience for that change to occur. We know some things that we really don't like. I mean, those are things in the manifesto and the things we're talking about now in the COVID crisis, the 2-child limit and the benefit cap, and the way the sanctions and conditionality system works for people and what that has meant. And I think that is at the heart. When I talk about universal credit, that's what I think people think of. They think of a punitive. They don't think of a modern, effective system that's there for them, that's their entitlement, that they, as a citizen of this country, will be there for them when they need it. They see it as something which will be there and it'll be done to them. So we've got some of those features that we know will have to change. We also have some of the delivery and design changes that I think we'd all recognise that are needed. That's the 5-week wait. I mean, it was a 6-week wait when we had universal credit as a pathfinder in my constituency, and all the problems, by the way, of those pathfinder pilots around the increase in housing arrears, the increase in food bank use. All of those things were evident at that stage, and those pilots came with much more support for sort of your local CAB and support services. The government just never listened to that. It's not a secret what's wrong with that. Everyone knows what the consequences. They can see the consequences of that, but they've ignored it. There are also some of those features around direct payment to landlords and the need to have some flexibility so you get payments on a basis that suits you rather than which is written down in statute as the way to do it. I think one of the things that's quite interesting is now, because of devolution in Scotland, there is a chance there to do some things differently. We've got to learn from that. We've got to obviously use, I want a Labour administration in Holyrood, and I want that to be the outcome of the Scottish elections. But we've also got a chance in policy terms to learn about some of the things that are changing. And then, of course, connected to that, it goes back to the point around how we link that into the existing other contributory benefits that exist. So we do have a good starting point. And the other point is that, the people I've been relying on pretty heavily so far have been, the work of the TUC, the work of the affiliated unions, people like PCS who obviously have members delivering and can give really clear insight into how things could change for the better. There's been a lot of good work from other affiliated labour organisations like the Fabians and from think tanks that work for all political perspectives because they're charities, but work from the IPPR and so forth. So there is a lot of material through that. I want the National Policy Forum process the party has to really be something that brings together those personal experiences, that expert work and expertise from people working in the front line. I mean, the number of, welfare rights advisors who are party members that are willing to get involved. Look, I feel all that support is there. That's kind of how I can get myself to sleep at night when I'm thinking about this, because I know, there is that backup and there is that experience to do that. And I think from there, we have to then basically, some of those ideas are competing. They're not all heading in the same place, but they're the starting point for the conversation. And using that expertise is where we need to go next. But I really feel that actually, there's a lot of kind of unity across the party in what needs to change. People have seen what this has done in their areas, and I think they really in any shadow team, when you get to the manifesto stage, you compete with each other a little bit because you can't have all the ideas in there, right? That's kind of how it works. I used to be in the Treasury team, so in a way we were the people saying you couldn't do everything, and now we're in a completely other position where we want that commitment and resources to do that. I can also tell you in terms of my colleagues across the Shadow Cabinet, Annalisa as Shadow Chancellor, Bridget as Chief Secretary, Steve Reed in the DCLG team, they all share this agenda, and that's what makes, I don't feel I'm competing with them on this. I think everyone wants this to be something which is a central component. And also, even for people outside the Labour movement, they're aware of the increase in child poverty. If nothing else happens, if we continue on the current trajectory, it's 5 million children in poverty in this country by the next election. The rate at which we've gone backwards since 2010 is really scary. And the only way to change that is that big coalition. The only way to sustain those changes is that big coalition. Because if I'm being honest, I think the Conservatives found it too easy to unravel some of the good things that we did in government, and maybe that's because we didn't get across to people just how important they were and the progress that had been made. So I think we're all in this, and we all agree with this. And as I say, we know the direction we're going in, and with the right kind of system and the right kind of engagement, like events like this, that's how we'll get the system that we're all really proud of.
Fantastic. That's really, really good. Really encouraging to hear that as well. Anything from our other two panelists on replacement for universal credit principles, Deirdre?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for that again, John. So I guess Unison's perspective on universal credit probably fill a book. But our disabled members did welcome some aspects. I don't want to be over the top, but it's one application system. And that's an improvement on, the 6 previous legacy benefits that people have to apply for. So, there are some positives that we wouldn't want to lose. We don't want to return to legacy benefits. But universal credit is not working. And certainly, welcome what we've outlined. But I think, it's not just about the list of design changes that we need. So get rid of the 5-week wait, get rid of the 2-child limit. It's not just a list of kind of fixes. There's a fundamental, there's something sewn into the fabric of universal credit that we need to somehow remove. And that's a hard job. I absolutely agree, that's a hard job. And that is what you said, that punitive approach. But also, it's the conditionality element of it. We think now conditionality is just kind of, well, of course there's going to be conditionality in it. But actually, that's not necessarily the usual thing internationally. And we're very parochial, aren't we? We just look at what's happening in England and Wales. Like you say, we ignore what's happening in Scotland, where they have a whole new version of PIP that we could be, looking at and assessing. But actually, conditionality, where is the evidence that it's worked? I'm not sure the evidence is there. I think it's very similar to, for example, the changes to council tax benefits, where we had, again, cash-strapped local authorities. They passported to them, and they ended up, getting people to pay council tax who'd never paid before. And that was going to, make those people pay and understand they had to regularly pay for this. Instead, they all ended up down in the debtors' court. It didn't work. There's no evidence that kind of conditionality works. It's not going to push people into getting a job if they are not able to get to work, or if the labour market stops them from getting that job. So I think that conditionality we have to absolutely look at again. And it should not be just accepted. That's now part of the system. We really have to look at, I think, taking that out and stuff. What we do needs to be evidence-based. I don't think there's evidence that conditionality necessarily works. But yeah, I think we're still, at the start, ironically, of thinking of what we replace universal credit with. But I do think it's more than just kind of a checklist of fixes. I think there are fundamental changes that need to be made to the system while holding on to, some of the positives. And we have to remember, some people are better off under universal credit than they were on the old system. So we don't want to lose that. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want the people who are better off to remain better off. But we want the people who are losing out to have a new system that actually works for their needs.
Fantastic, thank you. we're getting towards the end of the discussion. We've got about 5 minutes left, but it seems that there's a lot of agreement amongst the contributors, and that's really, really encouraging. I think, if we could sum up this conversation, it's that we need to do a lot of long, hard thinking, but there's lots and lots of agreement across affiliated unions, across the party. I couldn't put it better than Deirdre said earlier. This feels like a beverage moment, and we're all looking for a kind of more comprehensive, generous, universal system that lifts people up rather than punishing them for their positions. And I think that's a really, really great position to start from as a Labour movement and as a Labour Party. So I think that's really fantastic. Part of the reason why I'm speaking for a little while is to give you time to think about any closing remarks that you'd like to make. Like I say, we're nearly done, so we've about 4 minutes left. So if each of you wants to take sort of 30 seconds or a minute just to make any final calls to action or points that you'd like to make, then you are more than welcome to do so. Before I do that, I'm just going to raise one final point from the audience, and that's from Malcolm. He says he's worried about citizens' advice and the availability of in-person advice from citizens' advice. Obviously, navigating a lot of these schemes is really, really tricky, and there's lots of hurdles which people have to navigate. So that's a concern. I think it's worth that's something that it's worth the party and the movement thinking about. Right, that's enough from me. Final comment from the audience, from the platform. I don't mind who goes first. Whoever unmutes and goes first.
I don't mind going first, Joe. It's just to say that I think when you talked about how there's agreement and unity and across the Labour movement, people know what needs to change. I think, like Deirdre said, it's getting across to people. These are not just technical changes, policy changes, Whitehall changes that make a difference. There is a fundamental difference of view between ourselves and the other side. And it's broadly this. I think most people on our side, everyone on our side, I would hope, would say, look, the way you support people, whether it's back to work, whether it's with a disability, is, you genuinely support them. You need to make sure that you're not making their lives more difficult. You're not putting them into debt. You're not putting them under stress. And, that is how you help people. That's how the system should work. I genuinely believe there's a difference of view on the other side to that. And it is essentially a view that to get people back into work, for instance, the system's got to be pretty tough with you. It's got to be quite unpleasant. That, without that stick, you're going to, somehow not do what is expected of you. And I think that is the biggest difference. I mean, just to respond to Malcolm's point, on citizens' advice is like an emergency service in my borough. The relationship between me as a local MP and them is almost like, probably should pay them or something, or at least send them a nicer Christmas present. But, it's so important. Something that's happening in Lord right now, and everyone will know this, people who are already receiving tax credits, who are then finding they've got to apply for universal credit, finding that they're not eligible for universal credit, and being told they're not getting support from universal credit, and they've lost their tax credits. Right? Now, if you know the system, you know that's a big problem. But actually, a lot of people, without someone from Citizens Advice or the local MP telling them that, wouldn't know that, and that's wrong. You shouldn't have a system that works like that. A final point, Joe, to say is I'm really grateful for the chance to come on tonight and have this conversation. If you want to do these on any particular aspect, just on universal credit and its replacement, just on disability benefits and support, I'm more than happy to do that. I really appreciate the chance. Thanks again to all people who are on this and the support from the affiliated unions for the work we're doing. It really is much appreciated.
And thanks to you. Very, very good point there. And there might be a lot of agreement amongst the Labour movement and the Labour Party about what sort of social security system we want to move towards. But we should never forget that we have to make that argument in the public. We have to make that argument, in I was going to say in pubs and maybe across the garden fence is where we need to be, making these arguments. Who would like to go next? Deirdre.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Just to pick up on the point about citizens' advice, as I kind of touched on, I think Unison has long pushed really for local authorities to have more involvement in supporting people to complete universal credit funds, for example. Back in the day, I used to work in local government, And, we used to have significantly sized welfare benefits teams who would do all that kind of work and help people to maximise the benefits they were entitled to. And we really like to see more investment in that, as well as what Citizens Advice offers. So that's on that point. I think I should probably apologise to Johnny because, in fact, I did steal his line about beverage. He did say that first, and then I repeated it, but I gave him credit for it. But somehow it has become my line, but it wasn't. It was Johnny's. But, I do 100% agree with it, I have to say. But, a final, I think, point from us and from Unison, I think what we really hope that, the Labour Party will keep at the forefront of thinking moving forward on what we do around welfare benefits is that, disabled people are not one-dimensional characters on, a list of who we need to tick off to keep happy. Disabled people are, multifaceted. Disabled people are workers, which we absolutely want to push, and it's something that, always gets forgotten. But disabled people are workers, they're carers, they're pensioners, they cover, and people become disabled. So, it is not a particular, like I say, one-dimensional group. So we really, hope, Johnny, that that's something that you will keep at the forefront of your thinking when you're looking at this. And, as I say, overall, for the benefit system, it is about putting the needs of people and independence for disabled people in particular at the heart of the system. And making it work for the people it's supposed to be there for. It's not meant to be about punishment. It is meant to be about supporting people. But thank you very much for this tonight. It's been really, really great.
Fantastic. Thank you to you as well. Really, really vital points. And thanks to your contribution. Finally, Jo.
Thanks, Joe. Again, I'd like to thank you for holding this event. I thought it was really important to hear from Johnny and David. I hope people did hear from me because I know there was some problems with the sound. So what I would say is if you want to find out more about the social campaigning work and about the new deal for workers, please go to our website and there's loads of information on there. Because I think some of it might have got lost with the sound problems, and I'm okay to think that people don't get a chance to hear about it. But thanks very much again for having us, and I hope that this is a good starting point for further discussion about, the compassionate social security safety net that we need to build.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jo, and thanks so much to everyone that's taken part in the conversation. Thanks for your fantastic questions and points that you raised. Make sure that you stay tuned for the next one of these, yet to be announced, but make sure that you sign up to our email list, labourunions.org.uk, follow us on Twitter, Labour Unions UK, and on Facebook as well. We'll make sure that all the links and all the things that we've spoken about this evening, whether that's the parties thinking about the future of social security, whether that's USDOR's New Deal for Workers, or whether that's Unison's thinking with regards to social security, they will all be shared after the event on our social channels, so you wouldn't have missed a thing. Make sure you sign up to those wonderful campaigns, and as Jo said, contribute to Labour's MPF as well. It's a really good time to be doing these, to be thinking about what a better system looks like, and being ambitious in that. Thanks again to everyone that's joined us. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.